Okay. All right, cool. So, listen, it was great talking to you yesterday. Looking to have a great conversation today about threshold deontology. Um, it's a normative theory I've been really interested in for quite some time now. Spoken to a lot of people about it, and I look forward to the chat.
Yeah, so I listened to your conversation with the guy, the one you recommended, right?
Tyler Blake Cook. Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I don't think what I have to say will be repetitive as what he had to say.
Okay, good. Yeah, because you mentioned you had like a supervenience kind of thing to say, or something related to the wrong kind of reasons problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So again, like to get there, I need to ask you some like questions
Sure.
first, because I think what deontology is and what like threshold deontology is can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question I would like to ask you is, what is your deontological considerations based on?
Yeah. So if by when you say it's what is it based on, you just mean like what is it? Are you asking like some sort of grounding thing, like what is it grounded in, or like what is it, or like what kind of
Yeah.
deontologic
So,
constraint?
I mean, yes, I'm not asking you for like the meta-ethical
Mm-hmm.
justification of whether or not
Sure.
deontological duties exist. But you should, for example, I take it that if we have a duty to, for example, help other
Mm-hmm.
people in need or not to steal,
Mm-hmm.
that duty ought to be based on like moral values and moral reasons. For example, if the duty not to steal was based on, well, not stealing is something that makes the world more red, just then that wouldn't be a moral duty that
Mm-hmm.
is of any relevance to any deontologist. So I'm asking, what is it you base your duties on? What do you think justify these duties?
Yeah. So I don't have. I mean, I take a sort of similar approach to Rossian deontology. So the I don't know if he outlined a justification for the duties. If you, I don't know if I even have a quote unquote justification for them other than I'm just a subjectivist and I have different types of motivating reasons that are cashed out or described or modeled well as duties, and I have some other motivating reasons, internalist reasons, that are modeled well as consequences, or consequences. What's similar to me about Ross, I'm not an intuitionist, but what's similar to me about Ross, I would say, is that different duties can override one another. But if you're asking for like some justification or why I consider it, that's just going to come down for me. That's just going to come down to my subjectivism, and that's just going to be that there's going to be some motivating driver for me. There's going to be some motivating reason, motivating eternalist normative reason for me, and it's going to be and that motivating reason is just going to be the kind of motivating reason that's going to be captured by duties rather than consequences. So I'm sure that's probably not a very satisfactory answer if you're asking for a justification for it. But I'll just note that I don't have the I don't. I'll give the same type of answer if one asks for the justification for consideration of consequences or utility themselves for normative consideration. What's the justification for them? I'll just give the same answer, and I think the same question could be asked. You could keep pushing it back, but depending on what you mean by justification, that might not be a very satisfactory answer. But yeah.
No, I think you're overcomplicating it. So I'm simply
Sure.
asking. So
Mm-hmm.
in if I'm a subjectivist and I think,
Mm-hmm.
wow, Avi, he's a really great guy. I really trust his moral
Mm-hmm.
perspective on things, and he tells me this threshold deontology, that's the way to go. And
Mm-hmm.
then I ask him, so what are some of the duties I have?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then you say, for example, well, you have a duty not to steal.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm asking for the simple reason for why do I have a duty not to steal? Like, what kind of values is at play in if I were to steal? What kind of values am I violating? What type of ethical considerations am I not following by stealing?
Yeah. So for me, again, this is not going to be a satisfactory answer, but for me, that is just going to that's just going to bottom out the same way. Like if you were to ask the question, why should I care about pain or suffering? Why should I care about utility? Why should I care about these things? There are certain duties that I simply care about, and it bottoms out at there. Now, you may be able to take some duties and like put them into other duties. Like you may be able to take a Morian approach. A Rossian approach, like beneficence, or this you should care about this duty because it ties into beneficence, or you should care about this duty because it ties into non-malfeasance. But
okay, so for example, you don't have anything about how the reason I should not like steal has something to do with like universalization principles, or it's because I'm not allowed to violate another person's rights, or I am.
That has to do. Well, hold on, but it has to do with violating another person's rights. But then you just ask me the further question about like, okay, well, why is that a right?
I'm not like trying to get to some like meta-ethical grounding here.
Sure.
So typically, if I'm like, if I were to this is a perfectly satisfactory answer because we're operating now in the realm of normative theorizing.
Oh, okay.
So we assume that meta-ethics is like sorted out.
Okay, I see. Yes. Yeah. And can I just say that I really appreciate you. Like, it's a breath of fresh air for me to hear you say that, because time and time again when I discuss normative theories, like people will try to drag the conversation into like a meta-ethical derail, and so like I very much appreciate you like being like good faith in that. So yeah.
Well, I'm a big brain type of guy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Hey, calm down, Mick.
So, anyway, so we're operating that the meta-ethical things, they're sorted out. Now, so for example, one answer for why I shouldn't steal, what motivates this duty, is something that I shouldn't, is that the autonomy is valuable, and I shouldn't infringe on other people's autonomy. And for example, one reason for why I shouldn't, if I'm a deontologist, I shouldn't push someone down on the train track to save 5 people, is because it's like never okay to treat people as an ends only. No, as a means only to an end. Sorry, you must always treat them as an end. So I'm just asking.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I'm so, to be honest with you, I don't have a fully fleshed out view of rights. Like I don't know if like, so, and I ask myself this question sometimes too. Like, okay, well, do I care about? Can all of the things that I'm talking about right now be like cashed out into like more simplified versions? So like, for example, murder or stealing or rape, etc. Like for the negative rights violations, are they all going to be subsumed under like autonomy? Like you're violating some sort of autonomy of the person in question. I honestly don't know. Like I think maybe a lot of them might, because I do have that as a concern. I do think like people have the right to autonomy, and that is like a pro tanto reason to form like downstream rights violations. But then like I would ask myself, okay, well, is that exhausted? Like, okay, well, maybe not. I don't think so. I think there are other considerations that I think would be duties that don't involve the violation of autonomy. So there's more to it than that.
So I'm not trying to look for a unifying value that is going to undergird all the duties.
Okay.
Perhaps you just like intuitively mention some of the values.
Oh, sure, yeah. So as you meant, so that would be one I would subscribe to. Like violating the autonomy of another individual is going to be a rights consideration. And there's going to be within that there's going to be more or less severe forms of violating the autonomy. So, for example, pinching a person without their permission is going to be a lesser form of a much lesser form of autonomous violation than killing a person, right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I understand. So then the reason for why you are a deontologist, I will get to the threshold soon, but for why you're a deontologist, is because you think there are moral values that individuals have that kind of protect those individuals and provide us with reasons for ensuring that we don't violate those particular moral values. And those particular moral values can be overridden by simple utilitarian calculations.
And
But
when
then,
you say simple, you just mean like trivial, like consequential outcomes and stuff like that. Like I just don't want to beg the question against threshold deontology. Like but because
yeah,
some
but it's like it can't be overridden just because
yeah.
an action has slightly more utility.
Yeah.
than-
Like if it's the net utility benefit of like just like a sip of a can of a Coke, and that's like
Yes.
exactly. Then yeah, sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Or more
So-
precisely, like the moral concern for certain actions, I think are bad, and the reason I think are bad are not exhausted by the consequential concerns, by the utilitarian concerns specifically.
Yeah, I understand. Cool. And then my second reason now is because you can be a utilitarian deontologist. Did you know that?
What can you just clarify what a
Yeah,
utilitarian deontologist? Yeah.
You can go the other way. You can think that the main operating guiding normative principle is to maximize consequences.
Mm-hmm.
But for particular occasions where the consequences cross a threshold, and then after that threshold, deontological considerations.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's like the inverse. It's like the reverse of threshold deontology. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So,
yeah.
So I assume that the reason then it's fair to say that the reason you're a threshold deontologist is because you think that this type of like deontological considerations and the value at stake in such considerations are significantly more important than consequentialist value of aggregating welfare.
Yeah, at least the ones that usually come up in like these questions. Yeah, like murder or rape or something. Like if we're talking about like the autonomous violation by the autonomy violation of like pinching someone in the cheek, then yeah, that for those kind of rights violations, I probably would look more like a utilitarian deontologist. But for rights like murder or rape or things like that, I would probably look more like a threshold deontologist.
Okay, cool. So no, I'm not sure how. If you can, I don't think you can move back between being a utilitarian threshold deontologist and a threshold deontologist, where after the threshold, that you value the utilitarian consequences. But let's not get stuck.
Well, I think I do think I've modeled a way of doing that, but sure, we don't like but yeah, we can go. We don't have to get stuck on that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then so then final question before we get into it. What is the reason for wanting to be then specifically a threshold deontologist?
So, I think specifically, threshold deontology captures my motivating concerns, my normative motivating concerns more than any other normative theory that I've seen. If there was another normative theory that I saw that captured them better, mapped onto them better, then sure, I would be happy to be pushed off of it and accept something else. I think there are some issues that especially more naive versions or less sophisticated versions of threshold deontology doesn't map on perfectly. But I think there's like work to be done there in ways like that can be amended. But I still think like by far threshold deontology still maps onto, it still maps onto like all like whole bunch of like these various hypothetical questions that whether it's a moral hypothetical, how I would answer it is consistent with threshold deontology more so than other normative theories, or like what gets to my underlying concerns. Yeah, it just maps onto the things I care about more so.
Cool. Okay, yeah. I feel I get that. I meant more that I'm just gonna throw something back at you and you can see if this resonates with you. Presumably the reason you're a threshold deontologist is because you think the implications of a view where, for example, you are not allowed to kill one person to save a million person is so counterintuitive that it must be morally wrong. And then the reason that you're specifically a threshold deontologist who after the threshold takes into account utilitarian considerations is because of the fact that you think this counterintuitiveness is explained by the fact that after a particular threshold, we're operating within the utilitarian domain of ethics.
So that's a bit of a okay, so there's a couple of things there. So, it's sort of right what you just said. So, I do think it's very counterintuitive. Although I'm not, I just want to be clear, I'm not an intuitionist. Not that you said I was. I think that what good things are to me, and this may get into the wrong kind of reasons problem. But actions that are good to me are just they're not going to be like desirable actions. I wouldn't use that wording, so to avoid any kind of wrong kind of reasons problem. I would say that what the good is there, what good actions are things that pro toto will be a motivating normative reason for me.
Pro toto, we mean pro tanto?
On the net will be pro toto. Like whether at the end of the day I will favor the action, I will view the action as good, is going to be what the pro toto motivating reasons are, and there's going to be different considerations that go into that, which are going to be the pro tanto. So
okay,
yeah.
I think okay. Then I think now I understand what type of threshold deontologist.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly. Because I'm not gonna because the second part of what you said, it seemed like you viewed it as if I'm switching almost from a deontic analysis to a utilitarian analysis, and it's not a two-piece function.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so let's just pause here because I think this has to be true even on the view you're saying, that up until the threshold, it is the case that an action is right if and only if it accords with the duties.
So, up until the on the net, the action will be right if it accords with the duties. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, and after the threshold, it's going to be the case that an action is right if and only if it's the action which best aggregates utility.
After the threshold, an action is going to be right. So that's true. But that still misses a little bit of nuance that I still would like to capture. But yes, I'll agree. So I'll agree with that.
All I want to. Yeah. So I understand that you think that even when we get into the domain where the action is right, if and only if it aggregates utility, you still think they're going to be kind of like deontological reasons laying in the background, but they are not just going to be strong enough to penetrate into
to say whether it's right. Yeah, exactly. The point is just that it's still going to be less right than if I were to have this like other view where it's just going to switch completely like a two-piece function.
Yeah. Cool. Then at this point we can get into what I think are my objections.
Sure. Okay, cool.
My objections. I think I have 4 to 3 objections depending on how you go through it. I'm going to start with an objection that I honestly consider to be a sufficient counterexample as for why the theory is like ridiculous enough to be disregarded. After that, I want to note something about why this theory doesn't have any proper action guidance capacity. Finally, then I'm just going to mention the wrong kind of reason problem. I don't think that's a big problem, but I think it's a problem. And then finally, I will leave the hardest hitting critique to the last, which I think that this threshold deontology, which will violate a conceptual principle of morality, which without that principle, morality cannot function.
Okay, that's a very lofty goal there, but maybe you'll achieve it. Sure.
Okay. So the first thing is just this like counterintuitive example, right? And as I said, I think this counterintuitive example is sufficient. So, because it's so ridiculous, right? So, in threshold deontology, it's going to be the case that, and then now we're just stipulating some numbers. Of course, if you're unsatisfied with those numbers, we can just stipulate it in another way. But we both understand that stipulations doesn't mean anything about what is true in practice. We're just doing principle analysis. Cool. So on threshold deontology, it's going to be the case that, let's say there's a terrorist of a kind.
I've heard this example before. Yeah, can I just give the example back and you tell me if I'm sorry to interrupt? Yeah, there's a terrorist who's like, kidnapped 100 people, right? And then like you're on your way to save him, and then he shoots, you're going to have to violate some rights to save the 100 people, but like while you're in the process of violating that right and haven't committed it yet, he shoots one of them and now it's below the threshold, right? Is that the kind of...
No, mine is a slightly different version,
Okay.
which I think is like more even
Yeah.
more counterintuitive.
Yeah, there's various different versions of this. I've read about them, but like maybe you'll have a different one, but sure. Yeah.
No, okay, but I mean we can. I think it captures the general principle.
Mhm.
So then it's like my question is like, how do you explain this?
Yeah. So I'm familiar with. So I've read like various papers that try to give this as a ridiculous counterexample of threshold deontology, and I think what makes it not counterintuitive is the exact type of threshold deontology that I've brought to the table. The reason is, in fact, so the difference between the one-piece function and the two-piece function diffuses that type of reductio, and here's how. So at first, at prima facie, it will seem very counterintuitive because, like, okay, well, you know, if you are about to commit this rights violation and the terrorist just kills one person and now you're only going to save 99 instead of 100, it looks kind of silly to say, like, okay, well, now it would be wrong to commit the rights violation. And the reason that seems counterintuitive is because we generally view these types of right or wrong kind of moral outcomes as like very substantial. But however, with the two-piece function, you can get around that by saying, okay, well, yes, it might be no longer the right thing to do by the difference of like that terrorist killing one more person. However, that difference is just going to be teetering on the fence of right and wrong, and even if there is some kind of difference between right and wrong, the magnitude is going to be so small that no one would really be able to fault you if you did it anyway. And even if it was wrong, it would be so trivially wrong, especially given the uncertainty in the equation. It's really not going to be a very potent counterexample. Like, you may conclude it's wrong, but the important part is the how wrong is it. If you started off teetering on the threshold in the first place, then sure, like any addition or subtraction to the consequences are going to trivially tutor you further in the good or further in the bad. That's trivial. But when we use language like, okay, well, now it's wrong, now it's right because you took one less or one more. Well, yeah, it is, but what you're leaving out is that just how much less right or wrong it is only because you've dichotomized a continuous variable, and by what we define right or wrong to be, we're dichotomizing some kind of continuous variable within this model. And anytime you dichotomize a continuous variable, you're going to have trivial steps above or below the threshold. But the point is that they are trivial steps above or below the threshold. So even if you are wrong by doing that, no one could really fault you for it. It's trivially wrong, and given the amount of uncertainty. Yeah, sure.
I just want to be clear. Clear. You say that the threshold, just to be clear, the steps that are just above the threshold and the steps that are just below the threshold.
Yeah.
Those steps are going to be trivial steps, trivial non-moral steps upon which the morals.
They would be they would be moral steps. I'm not saying they're non-moral steps. I'm just saying they're very. Maybe I should use the term magnitude instead of trivial. They would be moral steps of low magnitude. And the reason they'd be low steps of more magnitude is because we've set the hypothetical up that way in the first place, because we started off right on the teetering edge of the fence of the threshold. And so if you give me an example where, what makes a difference between the consequences where the action is right or wrong, and that difference is just one unit wrongness, you can try to form a reductio or a counterintuitive example by saying, aha, I found the case. Look, with the terrorist example. Haha. Like, if you just kill this one person, then if the terrorist kills this one person, then you shouldn't do the act anymore. What that misses is that, yes, like I'll grant you that, yeah, you shouldn't, at the threshold, you should not do the act anymore. However, if you were to do the act, the wrongness of that action would be very small. The wrongness of that action would have a very low magnitude. Yeah.
So I think you are not properly understanding what it means for an action to be right or wrong. So if it's the case that I'm committing an action which is morally wrong, then there are all types of moral costs entailed by me committing that action. So, for example, if I'm committing something that is morally wrong, I am liable for sanctions. I am liable to be blameworthy. I'm liable to be responsible. And another person has the permission to interfere with me trying to commit that action. So it's not the fact that, like, even though the difference in features is like the distinguishes between above and below the threshold are small, the moral implications are significant. So because we're changing suddenly the complete guiding principle of what constitutes a right and a wrong action, and with that we're also entailed to the personal consequences of us as agents committing the right and the wrong actions.
I just take those things to be baked into where the threshold is in the first place. Like those kind of downstream consequences in terms of judging the rightness or wrongness of actions, on my view, all of the things you just said are just going to be baked into the cake. So if you want to say, so all of the any consequence that, so the consequences, here's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that I said you can do something bad and the magnitude of badness is very low. Now you want to say that, well, even if the magnitude of badness is low, there can still be very potent moral consequences or considerations to that, right? Like moral blameworthiness, like someone...
For the person committing the wrong action.
Yeah, for the person committing the wrong action, yeah. Now, what I will tell you is that, my response to that is that, okay, well, typically, when someone... first of all, I'm not sure, like maybe so that could be the case. So the first thing I'll point out to you is that throughout society, we look at people performing bad actions that have a very low magnitude of badness to them. There are many examples of this. We don't lock them up in jail for it. And you could say, well, that's disanalogous because like there's a greater overall magnitude of stakes here, but the difference is still going to be a small magnitude. So it's not I don't see how it necessarily follows that I'll be, if it's one person greater, one person lower, I'll be put in jail for it. In fact, I'll make several arguments that why I don't think anyone should be able to put me in jail if I did that, even if it was in the wrong.
Can I just pause you here? So that your replies come to work in some cases, but let's take the particular case, right? Where
sure.
If I'm torturing someone to get him to reveal where he has hidden 1,000 prisoners.
Yeah.
And I torture, and that's okay on the threshold deontological conception. And now I torture him, and he reveals where one prisoner is. So now I go and save that prisoner, because he reveals the prisoners that is gonna die first due to oxygen starvation. Right? Now I have saved that prisoner. And now, if I now were to continue torturing him, I'm not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah. So at some threshold, you may not be able to do that anymore, and so
exactly. It's stipulated in here.
Yeah.
Now, if I were to continue torturing him, it's not like I would be committing some small error or some small wrongdoing. I would be committing enormous wrongdoing.
So I disagree with you there. On my view, that's not true. So at the one person, so if you torture this individual and save one person, and now that pushes it below the threshold, if you were to torture this person and save another individual, so if you were to then torture the individual and save the rest, for example, even though that might be below the threshold, that's not actually going to be an enormous wrong on my view. Trivially, actually, it will not be an enormous wrong. And we can go through if we want, we can reduce this even to formulations of how I can model like the deontic concern against the consequential concerns and prove. I can formally prove it to you that on my view, this wouldn't be this wouldn't be a huge moral wrong. So if that's an impasse for us, I can do that for you.
All right, let me just, okay, let's get to that. Let me just take the case in reverse, because I think that case is going to be easier.
Okay.
So let's say there's a terrorist who has tortured, who has hidden these 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And the only way I can get the information from him is to torture him.
Yes.
And I'm above the threshold, so I'm allowed to do it. So this is what the right thing is to do. So not torturing him would be wrong.
Yeah. So not torturing him would be wrong. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct.
And we're torturing him to save 1,000 people.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Given that we have necessarily stepped in to a utilitarian domain of ethics, where a right action is right if and only if it maximizes utility, not torture. So what it means to be good and bad is utility, and 1,000 people dying has enormous negative utility. Now, not torturing this guy is immensely wrong.
Okay, so that's a move so that's a jump right there. So I agree with you in the first part where what's going to coincide, although it's not going to be making it right, the what's going to coincide with it being right or wrong is going to be the utilitarian concern, but it doesn't follow from that not torturing him is going to be well, I'm sorry, did you say torturing him is going to be immensely wrong after one person is saved? Is that what you just said?
No, so what I'm saying is that here's this guy, he has kidnapped people.
Oh, right? I see what you're saying. I'm so sorry. Are you saying that given that we've crossed the threshold and we're going to be in the consequential domain,
yes,
it's going to determine what's right or wrong, and then torturing him is going to be so because of that, not torturing him is going to be immensely wrong.
Yes.
So that's the jump I reject. So that works for the one-piece functions. That works for a more naive version of threshold deontology, which is the two-piece function of threshold deontology. A one-piece model of threshold deontology as a one-piece function wouldn't actually conclude that, and I can show you if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I don't think this is something like my prior here is I don't think you can bake this in or math this out. I think this follows conceptually. But yeah, sure, let's try to demonstrate. Try to demonstrate how it doesn't follow.
Sure, I can. Yeah. So let's say. So first of all, I absolutely do think you can math it out, because just I think it's trivial that you could like just any other model. I think there's nothing about mathematics that is. I mean, understand you can make a conceptual point, but oftentimes our conceptual points are. That we find intuitive are actually not actually borne out in the math. So let's just say we have our so let's say I have my consequential concerns, and we can math that out is. Sorry, this Discord. Can you still hear me? My Discord is not.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. Because because I'm using, maybe I should plug my computer because I'm using Stream. I'm trying to record this, so I'm getting a pinwheel on my Discord. But I could just describe it out to you if you'd like. Basically, you can say, okay, well, we have our consequential concerns as a one-piece function, and that's going to be y. So we can say that concern is going to be y equals x, right? So we'll have a 1-to-1 ratio, like for every one person that's going to die, that's morally weighty for one moral unit. We're giving arbitrary units, and we'll just do deontic concerns in relation to the other. So it's going to be, one person is going to be one for, have a consequential unit of 1, and then the deontic concern, we can say y is equal to let's just say y is equal to minus 999 for the moral consideration of torturing someone. So it carries a moral consideration of minus 999. And so if you subtract one value from the other, if you graph these two lines out and you subtract one for the other, what you'll end up getting is you'll get this threshold of moral neutrality at 999, and so saving 1,000 people is going to be morally good. But you'll notice the moral value is on the y-axis, and you'll notice that if you subtract the two graphs, you're not necessarily going to always get a case where when you're past the threshold, the consequences are going to be enormous. That depends on how many people you're saving. If you're saving 500,000 people, yes, the consequences are going to be enormous of not torturing. You're going to say it's incredibly wrong to not torture this person. However, if you're just at the threshold, where like if you're just going to save 1,000 people, if you look at this graph, what's going to happen is you're going to see the moral goodness, the moral value, is going to be actually, the net moral value is actually going to be very low, even though you're still going to call it good. And if you want, I can show this to you. I can because I have my Discord back now. So let's say we have y equals x, and y is equal to minus. So y is equal to negative. So the line 1, we can call that the consequential concerns. Concerns is y equals x, and then we have the deontic concerns, and that's going to be y equals minus 999. Okay, and so if we graph, let me see if I can get the TD graph. If anyone has the TD graph, they can post it in the chat. Actually, I have it here. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we'll get something like this. You're looking at the general chat?
General chat, where is that? Let's see. Scroll down.
It's at the bottom. Like, right, yeah, you see the graph? You see the TD graph?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll notice a couple things. So you'll notice that if you were modeling threshold deontology as a one-piece function rather than a two-piece function, it's a continuous function, and our equation y equals x is going to form that red line, the consequence, the consequential concern lines, and that makes sense because, like, the more, we can call it utility for simplicity, but for each the more consequences of concern happen, the more linearly, the more like, well, it doesn't technically have to be linear, but the more morally, the more consequences good consequences you do, so the more people you save, the more good that pro tanto consideration is going to be, right? So that's the easiest to understand, right? You're with me so far?
Yes.
Okay. And now what we have is the deontic consideration. And the deontic consideration is going to be, let's just say, for this particular action, it's at minus 999. I'm just for everyone in the audience is listening, I'm not necessarily committing to this specific number. I'm just using it to the conceptual case. I'm not saying that that's where the threshold is for torture. For me, maybe lower than that. But just for the conceptual case, let's work with this. So if we have y is equal to minus 999, then what we have is we have a straight line. That's going to form a straight line, and the straight line for all points on the x-axis, which is we can just call it consequences instead of utility here, which is well-being minus suffering. But for all points, the formula y equals x. The formula y equals minus 999 is going to form a straight line, and that line is going to be at negative 999. Y is equal to negative 999. And so that makes sense because the deontic concern is independent of the consequences. So no matter what the consequences here are, the pro tanto deontic consideration is going to carry the same moral weight. So if I torture someone in one case where there's this amount of consequences, the pro tanto deontic concern is going to be this weighty. And if I torture someone, the same torture is going to be the same moral weight, pro tanto moral weight, in the other context. And so throughout all of these consequential contexts, the deontic, barring some sort of like views about consequences playing into deontology, like just excluding that for the sake of the case, like some Rossian considerations, that's what we're going to end up with. Are you following that so far?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now you'll notice that there's this other line, this purple line, which is the T line, and that line is formed by taking all values for all points in the graph of C, and and adding them to D. So you add the pro tanto, you combine the pro tanto consequential actions, and you combine them with the pro tanto deontic considerations. And
Wait, can I ask you a question? Are
Sure.
you saying that deontic considerations can scale more after we've already pressed into the
yes,
uh,
they could.
the
Wait.
area?
I'm sorry. Wait. Could you just speak when you said could scale more? Like what? Just repeat the question. I'm sorry.
So we have a deontological consideration such as not murdering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that goes to a threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the consequences of murdering are sufficiently good after that threshold,
Mm-hmm.
now we're in the realm of utilitarian ethics.
Now we're
Right.
in some sense we are sure, but like, what's the question that you asked?
Well, my question I ask is: are you saying that even after we have passed into the realm of utilitarian ethics, it's not only the case that these deontological reasons are still with us, but we can still get stronger deontological reasons while being in the realm of utilitarian ethics?
For the same deontic concern, no, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the concern is still there. The concern,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, but so the deontic concern is stable and cannot grow larger once it has crossed the utilitarian threshold.
Well, it can't grow larger even before it's crossed the utilitarian threshold.
Okay, cool. So the deontic concern is always a
It's unless you change the deontic, unless you change the action, right? Like unless you change the, unless you're like changing the hypothetical and adding more, like, you're murdering two people instead of one or something like that.
Right, so
Yeah.
it's always below the. I'm trying to follow here.
Sure.
I've never seen threshold deontology put like this before.
Yeah.
I'm saying that below the
Mm-hmm.
in the deontological zone, are you claiming that murder can be more or less wrong in that zone?
Wait, in terms of deontic concerns?
Yes.
No. It's the same. It's going to be one murder of one person in the same context is going to carry the same deontic concern for all of these different x values, which are just going to be consequential.
No. I'm asking something different.
Okay, what's the difference?
So presumably,
Uh-huh.
let's say we're at the bottom line where there are no utilitarian considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just going to be at the origin of the graph where c is equal to 0.
Yes. But then you would presumably say that murder is worse than thievery.
Then murder is worse than So I actually, if you want, I can represent. So yes, different deontic. Yeah. And I actually have a video to represent that as well. Like I can represent how the.
But the difference between murder and thievery isn't one of utilitarian consideration. They're ones of the strength of the deontic reasons.
Yes. Just like Ross considers non-malfeasance to weigh more heavily than beneficence, for example.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. So what I'm asking now is, in the below the threshold, in the realm of deontological ethics, is it going to be the case that murder can be more or less wrong?
On the pro toto? On the pro toto, is that what you're asking?
I'm asking just a very simple question.
Yeah, murder can be more or less wrong on the pro toto, like within both portions of the graph, and that's what's illustrated.
And you're telling me that the murder being more or less wrong, even while we're in the deontological zone,
Yeah.
is due to the fact that as I scale up the utilitarian considerations, not consideration, as I scale up the utility gained by murdering someone, that means that murdering someone is less bad.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so yeah, but I mean this doesn't. So
Well, and I could continue to how it deflates the reductio that you tried to bring if you'd like.
no, yeah, I mean I see how you would think that, but this just gives rise to another reductio.
Okay, what's the other reductio? Okay, so first of all, before you get to the other reductio, you grant that this is a way of diffusing that reductio. The reductio is like, well, one person, one little unit of utility will make like this majorly right or majorly wrong thing. You agree that that's something that doesn't follow on my view.
No. So yeah, I don't grant at all that you can scale rightness and wrongness in this way. You can scale badness of wrong actions, but wrong actions are always going to be wrong qua wrong.
Okay, well then we're just talking. Okay. So then this is just going to be a linguistic. Okay. So I understand that there are views where like some people can say the right action or the wrong action is always like the when we dichotomize a variable, they're going to be equally wrong, even though there's like some more badness. That's fine. But then we're just talking about different things when we say right or wrong. Like I'm gonna judge like.
Sorry, I'm gonna stop you there because it's not only talking about like different things. It's talking about like very important moral concepts.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
Like so,
okay.
someone. So I could say someone. Okay, so we can say it like this. Like, okay, it was wrong. Like the murder was wrong. However, the badness of the action the badness of that murder can have a very low magnitude. Would you accept that?
But you don't want to say that because you want to say that there's a difference in the wrongness. Because otherwise you can't get away from the problem that like committing actions that are wrong qua wrong entails certain types of liability responses.
But I reject that. No, but then I'm just going to reject that committing actions that are wrong qua wrong necessarily entail certain types of liabilities. I'm just going to reject that because I'm going to say that
you can't just say that you reject like the common sense understanding of what it means for something.
Well, I don't think that is. No, I don't think. I really don't think that is. I think so I think this is facile. Like I think, I'm not trying to throw smack back at you from the previous conversation, but I think even in our common parlance, like we understand that different actions, even while they're wrong, like there are certain mitigating considerations that may be so mitigating that an individual may get off on community service. So like just to say that I can't just reject. First of all, I can reject common sense like terminology. I absolutely can, but I don't even think I'm doing that. And I think to just reduce it to that or try to say like, oh, because I've dichotomized the variable is wrong and then anything that falls into the threshold is wrong.
When someone commits a wrongful action and we for example hold them to be less blameworthy, or less liable, that is not because the action is less wrong.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking. Okay, so that's true. That's not what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about an action. I'm talking about an action. Someone can be less blameworthy because the action is less bad, not just because. So someone can commit a given action and they're wrong, but on my view, someone could be less blameworthy for the action, even if committed intentionally, if the magnitude of the badness of the wrong action was very low compared to very large. And I don't think this is controversial at all. But even if it was, it wouldn't change my view.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. So I think that someone can commit a wrong action, even if intentionally, and be held to different degrees of moral blameworthiness in virtue of the badness of the wrong action being more or less bad.
Yes, but they're not. But they're gonna be yes.
And I think it's a further point.
Wait. This is important. Yes, but if the action is of the same category as an other action, so murder. If action A is murder and action B is murder, then both people had the intention of murdering someone for the sake of murdering someone. Those people are going to be equally liable and equally blameworthy.
Okay, so in that case, I don't think that necessarily follows. I think that if you have two different people if that's all that's into the hypothetical and there's nothing else like in that hypothetical, then I agree. But I think that if two people commit murder and have the intention to commit murder. However, one person is committing murder with the intention to commit murder because there are certain good things that will happen, certain favorable consequences that will happen, and the other one is committing murder with the intention to commit murder.
Yes, definitely. I agree. So we don't have to go down that road.
Sure.
So
they're not equally blameworthy on, like, we agree on that, right?
Yeah, of course, but then they're different. Then they're differing in intent.
Okay, well, sure. So I just want to, like, put a flag here. Like, I would say, so one thing I want to mention also, I also have a different way of, like, evaluating blameworthiness compared to evaluating the goodness or badness of an action, because I don't think those because I don't think they're the same. The general way I evaluate blameworthiness is an agent's intention of concording with my normative theory. But I think the normative theory here is just to judge the goodness or badness of the action.
So now we're engaged kind of like in an external critique of whether or not you have the correct understanding of rightness, wrongness, badness, blameworthiness, and how those concepts interrelate with each other. Okay, cool. I will grant you, for the sake of argument, that on your conceptual framework, then the kind of case that I had where above the threshold line, the utilitarian case we talked about, I grant that you can explain that as being less wrong, but I think you're operating with the wrong type of conceptual understanding of this. But I'm more interested in the internal critiques, because I don't want to get into a whole conceptual discussion about how to understand this terminology, because that would take a long while and I don't have much time. So I'll grant what you wanted for the sake of argument, and I want to get back now to but from that, I think you're making your view susceptible to an even more silly reductio ad absurdum.
Sure, go ahead, deliver it.
Yeah. So if now I am right below the threshold, right?
Yeah.
Then I can, and given that you said you had baked in all these things about liability, blameworthiness into the threshold, so then
really, I have to not necessarily liability, other consequences, sure, but not necessarily liability, blameworthiness, because I have a different model of judging blameworthiness, moral blameworthiness, than just a model of judging the badness or goodness of actions.
Yeah. So.
Okay, sure.
So now I'm right below the threshold.
Okay, sure.
So then, I can just commit a bunch of murders, and they're barely wrong.
So that's not gonna follow unless the so this is for judging individual actions, and I'll just posit to you that this is for cases where the individual actions, the consequences are tied to the deontic violations, and it's not like they're superfluous, because that's not going to be an interesting ethical question. Like if you're just going to say, well, I can just murder some other individuals. Well, no, you can't, because then what I'm going to do is just form the same analysis on those individual actions of those individual murders, and you're going to be way above the threshold, enormously so.
But in principle, simply this way is the case that me murdering a bunch of people has positive utility. So you're giving an example where where me murdering, I misspoke, where me murdering those people, a bunch of them, would have really a lot of positive utility, but not just enough utility to put it over the threshold.
Yeah. No, yeah. So, if you summated, so if you actually summated all of those up, you had that a whole bunch of murders in conjunction. I see what you're saying. So if you had a whole bunch of those murders in conjunction, and you did that time and time again, then yes, that action would be the individual actions wouldn't be have a high wrongness. However, the summation of all of those individual actions would have a very high wrongness. I agree.
No, because no, they wouldn't, because we're also summating the utility of those actions.
No, that's fine, but you're telling me, well, they would, because even if the utility also has a very high one, you're telling me that it's still below the threshold, which entails that the summation of badness or wrongness is still net wrongness. So we can say, like, okay, it's still net bad. So we can say it's negative, it's -1 on the net, on the pro toto. So if we say it's each individual action is -1 on the pro toto, then if you were to summate -1 over and over and over again, and by committing a bunch of murders, then yes, that's the summation of those actions would still end up at a net of a high negative number. Trivially.
Yeah, okay. So no, I will just give you a specific example to just illustrate the intuition here, or like unpack it for the listeners also. So
wait, but before you do that, can you grant that, like, just grant that, because you told me just now that you're giving me an example where I'm right below the threshold.
I'm right below the threshold.
Yeah, which means that the pro toto badness is greater than on the net is negative. So the pro tanto badness is greater than pro tanto goodness. So the individual action.
I guess what I'm trying to note here is that this example is like perfectly intelligible, right?
Okay.
So I'm committing a bunch of murders below the threshold.
Yeah.
Now, I'm doing that because I know that I wouldn't be doing something that wrong in committing these murders, because these murders will, as a happenstance, will be very close to having a lot of positive, will have a lot of utility, but not just sufficient utility to go over the threshold, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But my intention for committing the murders isn't the fact that they will also have a lot of utility, but my intentions for committing the murders is just that I like murdering people.
Okay. Yes. So in that case, I see what you're saying. Yes, I see what you're saying. Okay. So in that case,
can I just finish?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And as a matter of circumstance, it just happens to be that those murders are of such kind that they're barely any wrong due to the fact that they also bring a lot of utility, not just sufficiently utility for the murders to constitute a correct action in the murdering of those.
Yeah, I understand.
Now, this to me seems extremely silly.
Yeah, wait. Do you say what specifically seems silly? Does it seem silly that this person wouldn't be blameworthy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it seems extremely silly to look at this person and classify him as having committed barely any wrongs. Especially, let me note this. Especially if we now compare, because it's entirely possible, right? It's almost definitionally so that person who's committing all these murders, because he wants to commit them, but he knows that committing them also gives a lot of positive utility. That person is committing less of a wrong, definitionally, than someone who tells a lie to someone. But that lie has no positive utility whatsoever.
Yeah. So
this seems to be a mistake of category.
So my evaluation of that, I'll tell you my evaluation. I don't think this is like silly at all. My evaluation is that this is just a very simple and trivial difference in analysis of whether we how we morally judge intentions, whether we bake that into the action itself or whether we bake that into the person, the agent. And so, for example, if I have someone who tries to save the world but ends up committing a murder, I'm going to say that action, the action itself that person did, was a bad action, but he had good intentions, and so therefore is a good person. However, if the reverse was true, if you have an agent who commits a murder, because he wants to commit a murder, the intention is that he wants to commit a murder, and he just happenstance ends up saving the world, what I would say is that actually that action that this agent committed was a good action. It just happened to be, luckily, a good action.
Yeah,
However,
this is not what I'm objecting to.
Then I don't understand. I don't understand the objection.
I'm objecting to the fact that on your conceptualization of threshold deontology, it's going to be conceptually possible for there to be this type of murderer who does these murders that are exactly below the threshold. He does them and he feels good doing them because he really likes fucking killing and torturing people.
Yeah.
He just thinks it's so good. As a matter of happenstance, that person, it's also the case that those killing those people has a lot of utility. But so I'm not saying that person is as doing something as wrong or as bad as someone who commits those same type
That's
of
not
murder.
what I'm objecting. That's not what I'm saying you're saying.
Okay, so then I might have not misunderstood. But what I'm objecting to specifically is that on your conceptualization of threshold deontology, that person will be committing less wrongful actions than someone who tells a lie, but that lie doesn't have any positive utility at all.
Yes, and yes, in the action itself, I accept that, and I don't think that's a reductio, and I don't think it's silly, and I'm trying to explain why.
Okay, what is the explanation why that's not silly?
Because what I have a difference, because the system is not meant to judge individuals as good or bad people. The system is meant to just judge the actions themselves, and I fundamentally have a different system of doing both. So this is what I would say. Like you might say that my analysis of just the examples I gave earlier, and I'll repeat them again because they are very relevant. If someone has the intention of saving the world and kills and commits murder, and it didn't save the world, I think that person committed a bad action. Like, that's a bad action that they committed, and it's more bad. It's more of a bad action than someone who has the intention of murdering just because they like murdering, and they ended up happenstance saving the world. And the reason I think that, now you may, on prima facie, you may say, well, that's ridiculous. How could it be worse for someone to kill because they just like killing and they just happenstance save the world? And my answer to that is because I'm only judging the action and not the person. I judge people based on their intentions to concord with the normative theory, and I judge actions based on whether the action concorded with the normative theory.
I mean, but just to be clear, your conceptualization of the threshold, and after this, I just wanted this to be clear.
Yeah.
Yes or no, and after this, I'll move on to what I think is the conceptual problem. But so, on your conceptualization of threshold deontology, it is entirely possible that someone who commits a lot of murders close to the threshold is doing less wrongful actions than someone who tells a white lie, but that lie happens to not have it.
Yes, it is. However, it's important to also add that it would still be the case that person is much more of a bad person. The person
I agree. So
and I don't. As long as you add that in, I don't consider it to be ridiculous or silly. I don't consider it to be a reductio or even worth noting. Only maybe worth noting as a distinction between judging actions and judging intentions. But if the posit here is just like to say that doesn't align with my intuitions, it perfectly aligns with my intuitions.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I will assume that, like, I think trivially most people will think that the murderer has committed more wrongful actions than the person who told the white lie. That's an empirical claim. You might be right, you might be wrong. But if we were to end up doing that type of investigation, I would just want to make it clear that I'm judging actions and intentions differently, and here's how I would judge the intentions alongside it. And then and then we would do that empirical exercise. Sure. I mean, I would actually. So I at some point we can do this. We can have the discussion about how you think you can separate the badness of a person from the wrongful action on your system.
Sure.
I don't think that's possible on your system.
This part of the system alone, it wouldn't be. But there would be other work that needs to be done. There would be other models in conjunction. But sure, yes.
Yeah, but I want to now go to what I think is the big problem. Yeah.
Okay.
So, here is a principle of morality for which without morality cannot work. The principle of morality is the following. I'll just have it spelled out also so you can look at it. I'm
Sure.
just gonna write it down. General chat. Am I supposed to do it in general chat?
Yeah, you could do it in general chat. That's fine.
Okay. I'll do it in debate because it seems to be less people talking there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's true. Sure. Let me go over there.
Sorry, what channel are you going to post it in?
It's in debate. It's in debate. Also, like, please keep talking up to a minimum. Principle of moral supervenience, which states that two actions cannot differ significantly with respect to moral features, without differing significantly with respect to the non-moral features. Okay. Yeah. Now, I'm aware some people reject the principle of moral supervenience, but let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that I accept the principle of moral supervenience.
First, let me just explain why. First of all, I haven't encountered anyone who rejects this principle. So if you have anyone in the literature who does that, I would love actually to read it.
Sure, but let's just take it to be the case that I accept the principle of moral supervenience. I
want to just explain why I think this principle is fundamental to morality.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't accept this principle, if you deny the principle of moral supervenience,
mm-hmm.
then that means that you can have an action that a murder, for example, and the murder is wrong. But
Mm-hmm.
then it magically turns into right, even though there's no difference in the properties. If you deny moral supervenience, that follows.
Even if so if you not well, you can say magically, but I accept. Look, it doesn't matter because I accept the principle of moral supervenience, but but I just want you I have met some people who don't accept the principle of moral supervenience. That's all. And they will, and I'm not the one to defend that, but and in any case, sure, I would be interested in seeing how what I've outlined is somehow violates the principle of moral supervenience.
Yeah.
Or how, because my intuition is just that this is going to be like an equivocation of scope or something, or like pro tanto pro toto. But if you can show me that it really there is a genuine violation there, then as opposed to some superfluous one, then sure.
Yeah. Cool. So then we have a case where there is 999 people who can be saved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saved by 999 people who can be saved. But I'm just trying to figure out exactly how to construct this case. So we have 999 people who can be saved by you torturing someone.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
But we stipulate that this is wrong because below threshold.
Okay. So the threshold would be 1,000 or something, right?
No.
Well, you said it's below the threshold. Oh, we can make it higher. You're sure? 1,000 or more, right? Or above 900.
No. We're gonna make it way more silly than that.
Okay. So we're gonna make it 1 million or a bill
999 saved by torture, but now we add in So now we add into the 999 100 ice cream licks.
Mm-hmm.
And we stipulate that these ice cream licks are only accessible via torture.
Yes, I see. Yeah.
Okay. Now, so then now suddenly the only difference between the original case where the 999 are saved by torture and the other case where the 999 are saved by torture, but also you get 100 ice cream licks, is going to be these 100 ice cream licks, right?
Yeah. So let me just see if I'm following. So you're saying that so I torture one person, I save 999 people, or and then also say that I torture one person and there's 999 people getting ice cream licks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so let me make an example. Those 999 people also now get one lick of an ice cream if they're saved each.
So they also. Oh, I see what you're saying. The example is, so in one case, that 999 people are saved by torture, and in the other case, 999 people are saved because I torture someone, and they also get 100 ice cream licks. Is that the example?
They only get one ice cream lick each.
Oh, they're not saved. Oh yeah, wait, hold on. Are they?
They are saved.
Okay.
And they also get one ice cream.
I see. So each individual gets saved, and they also get one ice cream lick, totaling to 999 ice cream licks.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, below the threshold, this is true.
Mm-hmm. An action is right if and only if it accords with someone's. An action is right if and only if it accords with someone's duties. If and only. Yeah. If you're below the threshold, sure.
Yeah, below exactly. And now above the threshold, you get this.
An action is right if and only if it maximizes utility. That's true for above the threshold, sure.
Yeah, exactly, above the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the difference between these two, morally, is enormous, because you have changed changed from one denominator of what constitutes right and wrongful action to another denominator.
You're going into the two piece versus the one piece again. So on the one, this is very important because every time you keep going back to this, so it's true. So those things are going to be true, but not the thing that makes them true. Not the thing that makes them. It's not the sole thing that makes them true. So yeah, it's true by what's the word for it? It's true. They're coextensive. It's true by coextension. On the one piece view. So, if I am, you can have very similar, below the threshold and above the threshold. You can have very, very similar normative attitudes towards. There's not necessarily going to be this huge normative difference being below the threshold or above the threshold, and I agree. There's a whole different way of analyzing it that makes it something right or wrong below or above the threshold on a two-piece function view, but that's not the framework of threshold deontology I'm giving you. I'm giving you a one-piece function, and so both below and above the threshold, really, in action, the way of saying it is really this is true it's coextensively true, but it's not really the thing that gets to the heart of what I'm saying because it's not what makes it true. Really, below the threshold are just things that are wrong, and the reason they're wrong is because the wrongness of the consequences don't outweigh the deontic wrongness. So the rightness of the consequences don't outweigh the wrongness of the deontic concerns. And above the threshold, it's right because the rightness of the consequences are outweighing the wrongness of the consequences, and there's concern for each at all points. So I don't know what you mean. You can unpack what you mean by enormous difference.
Well, the enormous difference, right?
Yeah.
Is that below the threshold, there's a very specific meaning to what it means to commit the wrong and the right action. I think that in both the below and above the threshold, the meaning of committing a right and wrong action is subsumed by the same thing. What I just told you would actually apply to below and above the threshold, because what it means to commit, what makes something right or wrong below the threshold is the same. It's equivalent to what makes something right or wrong above the threshold, which is whether so I'll just simplify the terms down. So whether C is greater, so if C is greater than D, then in all cases the action will be right, and if D is greater than C, then in all cases the action will be wrong. Now that's going to be true of below the threshold and above the threshold. So the same thing, the same principle is subsuming both regions of the graph.
The same region is the same.
Yeah, no, I understand that the same
sure.
principle is at play. But the principle,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm noting is that the non-moral features, in this case,
Mm-hmm.
that explains the difference in the moral features, are 100 ice cream licks.
And, okay, well that's not true, because they're not explaining all of the moral. Wait, so it's explaining some of the moral features. It's so you could. I think what you mean to say is that it's explaining the difference in whether it's right or wrong, right? But it's not all the badness or good. It's not the only thing explaining the badness or goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. And the reason, yeah, that's fine. And the reason that's fine to me is because you've clarified that all you mean by rightness or wrongness is dichotomizing a continuous variable. So it's just going to trivially be the case. And the thing I'm going to be interested in more is the badness or goodness. In the rightness or wrongness is just going to be a dichotomization of a continuous variable. Sure. So just as long as we're clear that what turns on the rightness, what turns on whether it's right or wrong, is just having more goodness, having that little bit extra goodness, then yes, that's something I've already agreed to in the first place. Sure.
But I don't think you're fully appreciating the gravity of the situation here. So, changing the definition of what constitutes a right action to what constitutes and making what constituted a right action contingent upon 100 ice cream licks doesn't seem to be able to carry the moral significance in the change between rightness and wrongness.
I don't. Why would that not be the case? If alone, sure. In that case, it seems like weird for that to be alone. But you're giving me a case where you've saved.
It is carrying it alone.
Wait, it's turning on it alone, sure, but that's only because you're already so close to the threshold in the first place because of the other moral features that have gotten you there. And so it's just going to be trivial that that's going to be the case. Like that's the reductio, really?
Yes, I'm just asking you now to see how silly this is.
I think it appears silly. No, you asked me, I'll answer. I think it's silly. I think it's silly in a very misleading, facile view, and where people may not have a nuanced understanding of what the system they're dealing with.
Okay.
So I think, but I agree that if we are very uncharitable to it and we give that kind of presentation, then yes, I agree that you might be able to have quite a bit of people see it as silly. However, with an understanding of how continuous variables work and how and why dichotomizing continuous variables just ends up trivially doing this, and the weight of what ought be and missing, and really, quite frankly, missing the picture of where you are next to the dichotomy in the continuous variable. I think once you understand that, it diffuses it almost entirely. That's the silliness, and it's like, oh well, that's just something that's trivially true, and it's not ridiculous.
So I think you're incorporating a lot of language here.
The reason I'm doing that, yes, I agree with you. I am. The reason I'm doing that is because I've explained. Okay, how about this? How about you tell me back what my response to what you've just said is going to be? Why do you think I think this is not silly?
I think the reason you think this is not silly is because we ought to view the cases continuously going up throughout your graph. So it's not the fact that we ought to view them at one instance, but we ought to view it over the totality of the graph. And when we have this broader scope picture, it looks like it isn't as counterintuitive. But what I'm noting is that it doesn't matter if we zoom out and it looks less counterintuitive, because what matters is the intuition of the explanation in the difference between the two cases.
But by difference, you're just talking about the difference with respect to the dichotomization of a continuous variable. You're not talking about the continuous variable itself.
I'm talking what explains the difference between the two cases. I'm not talking about the explanation.
And by difference, what explains the difference? By difference, again, I'll ask the same question. When you say difference, with respect to what? With respect to rightness or wrongness, or with respect to goodness or badness?
Rightness and wrongness. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
still talking rightness.
so then
and
you're
wrongness.
talking about a difference of falling under a given dichotomy of a continuous variable. That's what you're talking about, right?
I'm talking.
I mean, I don't know. Trivially, it has to be. That's what you're talking about. Because, like, okay, well, unless you think there's like it's a non-dichotomy.
I'm talking about how we explain how it is possible that 100 ice cream licks can explain
Yes.
the difference between one moral principle, between one action being right on the wrong side of 100 ice cream licks,
Yeah.
and an action being
Yes.
good on the
Yes.
non-wrong on the other side of 100 ice cream licks.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer. So I'll answer, and then I'll give you some examples. I'll give you some analogies that will probably like help in terms of why that's not counterintuitive. Okay, while it seems counterintuitive at first glance, the reason why this is not counterintuitive is because by rightness or wrongness in this setup, we just mean taking this line and saying anything above this line is going to be right, and anything below this line is going to be bad, or wrong. And so, when we already have so much goodness pushing a bad action to this line, to this dichotomization of a continuous variable, then what's going to happen is, yes, it's going to be very easy for even less than 900. You know, if we're close enough, it's going to be not counterintuitive for even less than 999 ice cream licks to push it above the threshold, because it doesn't take much there to begin with. And let me just give you an analogy for why this is like really intuitive. Are you familiar with like the term like I'll give you a medical example, but I'll make it simple. Like, are you familiar with the term like high cholesterol, or like
High cholesterol.
yeah? Are you familiar with that? Or like
I mean,
high
so.
high blood fats, high triglyceride, hypertriglyceridemia, hypercholesterolemia, like
Yeah.
any of those medical diagnoses, right?
Yeah.
Now, how much cholesterol you have? Let's just say, for argument's sake, we're going to call it at 200. That separates whether you're normal or whether you have a disease called hypercholesterolemia or high cholesterol.
Yeah.
Right? Now, let's just say that you've eaten like a whole bunch of like bacon, and you've eaten a whole bunch of cheeseburgers and everything, and your cholesterol level is 999.9. Like,
Yes.
let's just say, okay. Now let's say you have, like, I'll go to the ice cream lick example. Let's say you take a little drop of ice cream and you lick it, right? And then it pushes you over to having 200 as your cholesterol. And
Yes.
now all of a sudden you were free of the hypercholesterolemia disease, and now you have the disease. And it looks silly at face value. It looks very silly. How could that one drop of ice cream have given me this disease? How could that have happened? But that's because what defines that disease is forcing a categorical variable on a continuous variable, which is what's being done with rightness or wrongness on the good and bad. We take a continuous variable and we force a dichotomy on it. And anytime we do that, you're going to get that feature. That's a feature that's going to come up not only in morality, but even in medicine. In the sciences it comes up. Where even one lick of an ice cream is going to make the difference between you being a diseased person and you being a non-diseased person with respect to that disease. And it sounds very silly, but once you understand how you got there, once you understand the variables in place to get there, it's actually not silly at all. It's just one of the consequences, one of the features of setting up a dichotomy on a continuous variable in the first place. You always have that feature.
Yeah, but this is not. This is disanalogous to.
What's the disanalogy?
Yeah, can I explain?
Sure.
Yeah. So in the cholesterol case,
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be the fact that below, so a person who's approaching the threshold, did you say 200?
Yeah, 200. Let's say 200.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say 200 cholesterol. I don't know what it's.
Yeah. We're just using it as an example. That's fine.
Yeah. So So once you're approaching the 200 cholesterol,
Mm-hmm.
you're getting higher and higher cholesterol, right?
Mm-hmm.
And above that line, and above a specific chosen threshold, we say that your high cholesterol is of such nature that now we consider you to suffer from the disease of high cholesterol.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but it still continues what is going on throughout this case. So it's still the fact that what explains the fact that you're now suffering from a disease.
Wait. When you say it's still continuous. What is still continuous on your view?
Yeah. Okay. Ignore the word continuous. So,
well, this is important. You're on the right track.
I'll retract the word continuous. We
Okay.
can incorporate it later because once I've explained what I think.
Sure.
Why it's
Mm-hmm.
So, explanation for
Mm-hmm.
why you have a non-cholesterol, not a cholesterol disease and a cholesterol
Mm-hmm.
disease, is gonna be your cholesterol levels, right? So it's the
Mm-hmm.
same variable which explains the having a cholesterol disease and not having a cholesterol disease. So on either side of the threshold, it's the same things that explains the cholesterol, respectively non-cholesterol disease, i.e. the cholesterol. But so it's perfectly understandable then that the concept of having a cholesterol disease supervenes on the level of cholesterol in your blood, in your blood, or like body or whatever.
Yeah.
But in the moral case,
Mm-hmm.
that which explains why it is wrong to torture 999 people
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that this violates someone's deontological rights. But now we're noting that adding one ice cream lick to that is a different type of explanation for the rightness and the wrongness. So it's not explained by the same theoretical structure anymore.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it is analogous, and I see where you're trying to break with this analogy. If I may. That's
Okay.
why I gave you the cheeseburgers, bacons, and the ice cream in the first place, because what's happening here is what's explained. So here's what's happening in the moral case for me. What accounts for whether it's right and wrong is how much badness or goodness it has. That's the variable. It's all going to be this. Everything's going to come down to the same variable, just like in the cholesterol case. You have one variable, how much cholesterol you have, and then you have another variable, which is in the moral case is how much rightness or wrongness you have. Badness or goodness. Now, at a certain threshold for badness or goodness, things are going to be right or wrong. At a certain threshold for cholesterol, you're going to have hypercholesterolemia or not have hypercholesterolemia, have the disease or not have the disease. Now, what factors in to the badness or goodness, and what factors into the cholesterol, they themselves are going to be those tertiary things that we're talking about. So a tertiary thing will be violating the rights. So we have a primary thing, which is the rightness or wrongness. The primary thing in the cholesterol case is going to be having the disease or not having the disease. The secondary thing is going to be, in the moral case, is going to be the variable of badness or goodness. And the secondary thing in the cholesterol case is going to be the variable of cholesterol level. And then the tertiary things are going to be the things that in the cholesterol case are going to be the things that the cholesterol level supervenes on. The cholesterol level supervenes on. And then in the badness or goodness case, we're going to have the tertiary actions for which the badness or goodness supervenes on. And so when you have violating someone's right, that's going to decrease the badness goodness variable. So you're going to violate someone's right, it's going to be lower. However, you save a whole bunch of people, it's going to be higher. And then when you just add a little bit more goodness, which is the licking of the ice cream, that was going to explain it's going to explain the increase in goodness, which itself explains the increase in rightness wrongness. Just like in the cholesterol case, you're so close to the threshold, you may have taken a statin which lowers your cholesterol, but it's countervailed with the consequences of eating a whole bunch of bacon, egg, and cheeseburgers, which will increase your cholesterol to 199, and then that one lick of the ice cream changes the variable, the secondary variable, which is your cholesterol, and that explains going above the threshold to have the disease now. So I'm not seeing the disanalogy then, given that we have the primary, secondary, and tertiary, all those things that are playing. So the tertiary plays into the secondary plays, tertiary plays into this, secondary plays into primary. So I'm not, so that's why I gave you the tertiary things. So I'm not seeing the disanalogy.
Could you just define the word tertiary for me?
Yeah, the third order. Like I'm just, because like, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna try again because I still think it's disanalogous.
Sure. Okay.
I'm gonna try again. Okay. So having cholesterol, high or low cholesterol, supervenes on your cholesterol levels, right?
That's so having high by the disease, it supervenes. It's supervenient on your cholesterol levels. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and at 200 cholesterol, then the disease is instantiated.
Yes, at 200 cholesterol, the state of the disease is instantiated. Yes.
Yes, and there's nothing else that can instantiate the disease. It is just the high cholesterol levels.
Yes, it is just the cholesterol level reaching 200 or above. Yes.
Yes, exactly. Now, the reason why I think this is disanalogous is because below the threshold in your threshold deontology, the rightness and wrongness of an action supervenes solely on the deontological consideration.
Okay, no, so it doesn't. Wait, but no, wait. So, okay. So you're saying it supervenes only on, so it's only going to supervene on one of those things below the threshold. So it only supervenes on. Okay, let me see if I wrap my head around this. So you were saying the supervenience is different because below. Okay, well wait a minute. Hold on then, because I can say. But then I could just reproduce the analogy again and make it analogous by just saying that the only things. So I can. Okay, so I see what you're saying. So here's the rejoinder. So let's say in the cholesterol case you only have two considerations. You have statins and you have ice cream.
Well, is statin what is?
Oh yeah, it's something that it strongly decreases. It strongly decreases the cholesterol level. Right?
Yeah, I'm just gonna write this up. Statin, something strongly decreases cholesterol.
Yeah. And then you have, let's say you have high fat ice cream, right?
High fat ice.
Yeah. And then you have a certain you have a decrease in your cholesterol from the statin, but at some threshold, which is 200, if you eat more and more ice cream, then you will outweigh the decrease in the cholesterol from the statin because of you've eaten so much ice cream, and then you'll reach a threshold. Okay? Now, below that threshold, whether you have the disease or not, it only supervenes on the statin. It doesn't supervene on the ice cream. And above the threshold, whether you have the disease or not, just supervenes on the ice cream.
No, the cholesterol disease, like the disease you're talking about, doesn't supervene on the ice cream. The ice cream is something which can cause higher cholesterol.
Yes. But let's just say that your statin gets you to minus 100. I'm sorry, your statin gets you to 100. Right?
So there is a medicine you take.
Yeah. It puts you at 100.
The statin medicine decreases your cholesterol.
Yeah. So let's just say for the hypothetical, let's just make it simple for the hypothetical. Let's say it sets you at, it puts you at 100 without consideration of amount of ice cream eaten. right?
Yeah, so if you take the statin,
Mm-hmm.
you're always going to have cholesterol level 100.
Without consideration of ice cream eaten. The ice cream can change
Okay.
that.
If you take the statin
Mhm.
and you don't eat ice cream, you're always going to have cholesterol level 100.
Yes, and if you don't eat the ice cream. Now, we say for every doppel of ice cream you eat, you increase your cholesterol by 1.
So yeah, so every ice cream increases cholesterol by 1.
Okay? Yeah. Now, there's going to be a threshold. If you eat 100 ice cream, 100 doppels of ice cream, you will reach a threshold.
So if you eat 101 ice creams,
Mm-hmm.
you get to 201 cholesterol.
Yeah. And so the point here is that below the threshold, what makes it such that you have the disease or not, below this threshold, is just supervenient on the statin. And it's not supervenient on the ice cream below the threshold, because for any points below the threshold, it's not supervenient on how many ice cream, because you're still below the threshold. But above the threshold, it's only supervenient on the ice cream and not the statin, because at all points above the threshold, you have the disease.
No, you're confusing causal variables here and variables which can instantiate. So the statin, the statin causes you to have low cholesterol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it strongly decreases your cholesterol.
Yeah, we said in the case, hypothetically, in the case of this, we puts it at 100. Yeah, sure.
In this hypothetical case.
Yeah.
So that's a causal fact for why you have low cholesterol. But the cholesterol, and then eating ice cream is something that causes you to have higher cholesterol.
Yes.
Yes.
But what I'm asking is not with respect to the cholesterol level. It's with respect to the disease.
Yeah. So the ice cream causes you to have each pint of ice cream causes you to have 1 more cholesterol.
Yeah. Now my question to you, here's my question to you, regardless of whether you consider it a causal variable or what, regardless of that, my question to you is, below the threshold of 100 ice creams, right? Below that threshold, is the state of having the disease supervenient on how much ice cream you've eaten?
I don't understand the question. How can it supervene on how much ice cream you have eaten when the ice cream doesn't is a causal thing for cholesterol levels, which is that which instantiates the disease, and B, you haven't reached the level of cholesterol yet where you don't have the cholesterol disease.
I take supervenience to just mean that like something does not supervene on another if there are no changes to the so y does not supervene on x if any change in x does not produce a change in y. Do you agree with that or no?
So every change in so that's what it's supervenience.
Yeah.
means.
So I don't understand the incoherency of the question then, because if it's the case that that the disease state is y, and it's the case that the ice cream is x, then below the threshold it's true that there's no change in x that would produce a change in y, and so it's not the case that y supervenes on x. Seems trivial.
No, because the cholesterol disease never supervenes on the ice cream. It supervenes on the cholesterol levels.
Yes.
The cholesterol levels supervenes on the ice cream.
I agree. And in the case of rightness or wrongness supervenes on the goodness badness, and the goodness badness supervenes on the deontic concerns and the consequential concerns. So in both cases we have a tertiary.
No. This is how you turn your own theory. Because
What do you mean?
rightness and wrongness on below the threshold only supervenes on the deontic.
No, now that's not. Rightness and wrongness, yes, but goodness and badness, no. So yes, okay, but that's true in the statin case too. Look. You have. Okay, so the primary if you're talking about the primary variable, which is rightness or wrongness, or having the disease or not having the disease, it's not the case below the threshold that the amount of ice cream. It's not the case. Oh wait, hold on. Who? I have to meet someone. Who's popping off? Oh, that's you. Never mind. I'll just wait for
I'm
him.
just gonna shut down my computer.
Yeah.
Sorry. My wife came home, so I just have to go.
Oh, okay, sure. So I'll just leave it. Yeah, okay. It's just draw it out. We'll continue the conversation. We'll continue it.
Yeah, okay. Let's continue.
Okay, cool. All right, so this will be part 1. All right, cool. All right, bye.